Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1914 to 1916 Eastern Front, Flaming Swords and Lights. Poland, East Prussia, and Galicia. Anomalies in the trenches. While the Western Front of World War I is etched into history as a static war of mud, artillery shells, and barbed wire, the vast and brutal Eastern Front, stretching from the Baltic Sea down to the Black Sea across Eastern Europe, provided a vastly different theater of operations. Across the frozen plains, endless forests, and desolate steppes shared by the Russian, German, and Austro-Hungarian armies, soldiers were subjected to unimaginable psychological and physical isolation. The accounts of flaming swords, glowing beams, and celestial apparitions on the sprawling Eastern Front occurred primarily during the opening years of World War I, spanning from 1914 through 1916. These sightings were most densely reported during periods of intense, chaotic movement and desperate combat, such as the massive troop maneuvers, early battles, and rapid military retreats across Poland, East Prussia, and Galicia. Because the Eastern Front lacked the static, trench-lock stagnation that defined the West early on, soldiers were constantly on the move through remote, unmapped regional territories under extreme physical exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and psychological stress. It was within this harsh, unpredictable theater that frontline troops frequently looked up into the night skies and reported witnessing blazing, sword-like shapes and silent, maneuvering orbs of light cutting across the clouds. It was within this bleak, high-stress environment that frontline troops frequently reported encountering bizarre, inexplicable aerial phenomena that defied standard military categorization. Historical accounts and soldiers' memoirs from the 1914 to 1918 campaigns across Poland, Galicia, and Prussia document recurring sightings of anomalous lights that terrified combatants on both sides of the lines. Unlike the screeching arc of shrapnel or the predictable trajectory of mortar rounds, these phenomena appeared as solid, glowing spheres or pulsating balls of light. Witnesses described them hanging motionless over active battlefields or drifting silently across the no-man's land between opposing trenches, completely indifferent to the chaos below. In the religious and deeply superstitious rural culture of Eastern Europe at the time, exhausted infantrymen often interpreted anomalous nocturnal lights through a spiritual lens. Widely circulated frontline accounts spoke of massive, sword-like beams of light or fiery, linear shapes stabbing down from the clouds, phenomena that terrified troops who viewed them as apocalyptic omens or divine interventions. What most deeply unnerved the soldiers was the movement of these objects. Troops reported that the glowing spheres would suddenly accelerate at impossible speeds, perform sharp 90-degree turns without losing momentum, or sink directly into the frozen mud and wooded terrain without leaving a physical crater, wreckage. Faced with a flood of erratic reports from traumatized and sleep-deprived soldiers, military commanders and intelligence officers on both the Allied and Central Power sides scrambled to maintain order and morale by offering conventional explanations. Officers routinely dismissed the glowing orbs as experimental magnesium-based illumination flares or parachute flares used to spot enemy troop movements during night maneuvers. They suggested they might be secret chemical signals or optical illusions caused by early battlefield searchlights sweeping across low-hanging cloud decks. While commanders could easily write off individual sightings on paper, the frontline troops knew the difference between a falling flare and a luminous sphere that hovered past columns of marching soldiers, and actively avoided artillery fire. Just like the Foo Fighters reported by pilots a generation later in World War II, the strange lights of the Eastern Front serve as an early reminder. Whenever humanity pushes mass violence and technological innovation to its absolute limits, the uninvited observers of the high strangeness realm seem compelled to show up and watch from the sidelines. No soldiers on the Eastern Front between 1914 and 1916 did not fight UFOs or UAPs the way sci-fi movies or certain pop culture myths might suggest. Unlike World War II, where Allied and Axis pilots occasionally engaged in desperate adrenaline-fueled dogfights or target practice sessions with persistent Foo Fighters that paced their wingtips, the encounters on the frozen World War I Eastern Front were fundamentally different in nature. The interaction between traumatized soldiers and anomalous phenomena during those opening years of the Great War looked much more like a profound psychological and spiritual collision than an active military skirmish. Here is how it actually played out across the steppes of Poland and East Prussia. While World War I pilots, like RNA's Flight Sublieutenant J.E. Morgan, occasionally pulled out a Webley revolver to shoot at a bizarre railway light formation over England, infantrymen on the ground in the east weren't scrambling fighter jets or firing anti-aircraft artillery at glowing orbs. In 1914 to 1916, aircraft were still primitive reconnaissance kites. Anti-aircraft weaponry was in its absolute infancy, and soldiers had their hands full just trying to survive heavy artillery barrages, freezing mud, and massive infantry charges. When silent, glowing spheres or massive, sword-like beams of light drifted across the Eastern Front battlefields, soldiers didn't attack them. They froze, watched, and whispered. Because the Eastern Front was fought largely across deeply rural, traditional, and religiously devout regions involving Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and German peasant conscripts. Soldiers processed these inexplicable lights through a spiritual framework rather than a mechanical one. When a blazing linear streak of light or pulsating orb hovered over a chaotic troop movement, troops didn't think, that's an extraterrestrial scout ship or a secret enemy drone. Instead, exhausted infantrymen viewed them as apocalyptic omens, divine interventions, or flaming swords sent from the heavens to bear witness to the industrial slaughter unfolding below. The relationship between the troops and the phenomenon was defined by an eerie, silent distance. The glowing orbs and lights drifted silently, paced marching columns, or hovered over no man's land with total indifference to the human carnage. They didn't fire weapons, drop bombs, or engage enemy lines. Beyond sheer terror and awe, the troops on the Eastern Front simply learned to live with the anomalies alongside the endless horrors of conventional warfare. When a glowing ball of light floats silently over a trench where men are already freezing, starving, and dodging artillery, it quickly gets filed away under the mental category of just another terrifying thing the war is doing to the sky. During World War I, humanity was far too busy tearing itself apart with industrial weapons to actually fight unknown intelligence. Instead, the high strangeness of 1914 to 1916 served as a silent, haunting spectator to the dawn of mechanized warfare. Watching from the clouds as human beings built the very machinery of mass destruction that would eventually force the modern world to look up and wonder who else was sharing the skies. It is a genuinely hilarious and baffling historical contrast. Flash forward a few decades to the 1942 Battle of Los Angeles, and nervous American gunners spent an entire night firing 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft flak at absolutely nothing, while a mysterious, dome-shaped object casually cruised over the coastline. Yet, on the freezing, mud-soaked Eastern Front of 1914 to 1916, when colossal flaming swords of light or glowing orbs hovered right over troop movements, soldiers didn't scramble fighter jets or blast away with anti-aircraft batteries. Why? Partly because anti-aircraft guns hadn't been invented yet, but mostly because exhausted infantrymen were too busy trying not to get blown to bits by the Kaiser's artillery. They didn't open fire. They just stood frozen in stone-cold awe, wondering if God had finally given up on humanity and sent a glowing neon notice of eviction. This brings us to a fascinating question. How did human consciousness and wartime psychology evolve from World War I to World War II and straight into the Cold War? Conscripted peasants and early soldiers viewed anomalous lights through a deeply religious, fatalistic lens. To them, a blazing beam in the sky was an apocalyptic omen or a divine sign. By World War II, humanity had invented radar, machine guns, and supersonic flight. Consequently, our collective ego spiked, and Allied and Axis pilots treated Foo Fighters like annoying celestial gnats, sometimes even taking potshots at them. Once we unlocked the atomic bomb, the cosmic vibe shifted entirely. We realized we were no longer just primitive tribes fighting with sticks. We were toddlers playing with matches in a munitions factory. This leads to a deeply entertaining and perhaps terrifyingly accurate thought experiment about who or what is actually steering these craft. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that whether someone takes a potshot at a UFO like Flight Sub-Lieutenant Morgan firing his Webley revolver at the 1916 Rochford Railway light, or entire air forces try to lock radar on them. They never shoot back? They don't vaporize our jets, they don't declare war, and they don't demand to speak to our manager. They just hover. They observe. It honestly gives off the distinct impression of an interdimensional school field trip. Imagine an advanced, cosmic civilization organizing a luxury galactic history tour. The brochure reads, "Come to Sector 4, Earth. Watch primitive carbon-based bipeds invent gunpowder, build trenches, and systematically ruin their own planet in real time." Guaranteed laughs and existential dread. During World War I, it was a quiet, observational nature walk. During World War II and the Cold War, the tour guides suddenly got very nervous clipboard holders, once humanity figured out how to split the atom. Suddenly, the celestial tourists weren't just watching us smash our toys together. They were hanging out directly over nuclear silos, missile test ranges, and atomic testing grounds to make sure we didn't accidentally blow up the entire neighborhood before the semester ended. What are they watching now? Back in the World War I era, the phenomenon felt like a cultural sky tour, mysterious, distant, and wrapped in local folklore. But today, they aren't hiding in the clouds anymore. They are buzzing commercial airliners, dancing over naval carrier strike groups, and practically photobombing Senate intelligence hearings. So, as we sit here in 2026, juggling global politics, automated warfare, and thousands of active nuclear warheads, what are they watching us for? Perhaps they are just waiting to see if we will finally pass the cosmic pop quiz. Can a violent, brilliant, deeply flawed species finally drop the weapons, look up at the sky together, and realize we aren't alone? Until we figure that out, the field trip continues, and the galactic tourists are eating popcorn right from the front row. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archived Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.